welcome to Textile Talks. I am Emma Parker. I'm project manager at the Quilt Alliance, and I'm joining you today from Durham, North Carolina on a rainy day. I'm so glad you chose to join us today, and I invite you, if you'd like, to introduce yourself in the chat and say where you're connecting from. You'll have the option to send your message to everyone who's attending or just presenters. If you want to share it with the rest of the audience, just select everyone or all attendees. Today, we're presenting a collection of interviews and videos about quilts recorded by the African American Quilt Documentation Study Group, or AAQDSG, which is a nonprofit organization run by and founded by A'donna Richardson. We're also going to talk with Eric Galindo, who is one of the people who brought a quilt to be documented at a recent AAQDSG Documentation Day at the Berkeley Museum of Art and Pacific Film Archive. That documentation day was held in conjunction with their show of African American quilts called Routed West, which you may have heard of. Originally, we had hoped for A'donna to be here with us today to present these videos and share a little bit more about her organization's work and recent documentation days, but she is caring for an ill family member. So I will be sharing these videos, and I hope if you have questions about the African American Quilt Study Group and the Quilt Documentation Study Group, you'll visit her website. I'll share a link in the chat shortly. But I'm so excited to share a little bit behind the scenes of what we've been working on with A'donna and what she's been up to with the AAQ DSC. So first, for those of you who are new to Textile Talks, I saw a couple people saying that this is your first one. Welcome. Textile Talks is a free weekly series presented every Wednesday, except for holidays, at 2 p.m. Eastern, in partnership with the Quilt Alliance and 3 other partner organizations shown here: the International Quilt Museum, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and the Surface Design Association. With other organizations, we like to share the spotlight whenever we can. All Textile Talks are recorded and available via YouTube, so if you've missed past talks, you can check them out on our YouTube playlist, and we'll share a link to that YouTube playlist in the chat shortly. First, a little bit about the organization that I represent, the Quilt Alliance. Our mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of every quilt and every quilt maker. So it's a lofty goal. If you haven't heard of us before, we've been around for over 30 years, and we are a nonprofit member-supported organization open to anyone. So quilters, quilt lovers of any style, age, skill level, or location. We have both individual members and group and guild members, and our community has never been more large or more active or more important to us. So if you would like to support our work, you're welcome to visit us at quiltalliance.org. And as I said, anyone can be a member of the Quilt Alliance. We have a range of membership fees, including a pay what you like level. So there are memberships for every budget. Once you join, you'll have access to workshops and resources to equip you to do some of the kinds of documentation that you'll see today in your own community and be the very best quilt documentarian that you can be. So this covers things like labeling your quilts, cataloging them, photographing, talking about your quilts, and archiving the stories of your quilts. This year, we're also adding back one of our favorite Quilt Alliance projects and a historic Quilt Alliance member benefit, which is that members can enter our annual quilt challenge for free. Some of you may have been around in Quilt Alliance members when we had a very popular quilt contest, but this year we're bringing it back and making it more inclusive and, I think, more exciting for everyone to enter. The contest focuses on making a quilt that tells your quilting story. So however you define that, and we've really got exciting and special prizes, including a special prize for best label. So put a label on it. A little bit of housekeeping. You can use the Q&A box for questions, and we will try to address them at the end. You're welcome to use the chat box for greeting others and just chatting. We love to hear your feedback as you watch. And also, there'll be a survey for commentary and ways that we can improve Textile Talks. We really can't do this without your feedback. We've also enabled, or we have a live captioner here. If you prefer not to view the captions, you can be able to turn them on or off by finding the CC or live captions button, or if you're on a mobile device, going into your Zoom settings. All right. So as I mentioned, today I'm going to share some video documentation recorded by the African American Quilt Documentation Study Group. Like I said at the top of the hour, the AAQDSG is a nonprofit organization founded in 2022, I think. I hope that's right, by A'donna Richardson. I know she's been working on this project for a lot longer. And at the Quilt Alliance, we have been really thrilled to work closely with A'donna as she's built the group into an amazing resource for African American quilt documentation and quilt history. She has also incorporated a few Quilt Alliance projects into her documentation toolkit, which we invite anyone to do. This includes our QSOS oral history project and Go Tell It video project. You'll see snippets of both types of projects today. And it has been such a joy to see these videos come through every time new videos come on our Dropbox from A'donna. I get very excited. So the African American Quilt Documentation Study Group, I'll also share a link in the chat shortly once our videos are underway, has a mission to document and record African American quilts across the country through research, public documentation days, partnerships with guilds, museums, historical societies, and universities. Because African American quilts have historically been underdocumented and underrepresented in national documentation projects, it's especially important. A'donna invites quilt makers and quilt owners to bring their family quilts or quilts they've made to be documented, researched, and preserved through both collecting data about the quilt, so things like photographs, dating the quilt, determining where they may have been made and who made them, but also recording Go Tell It events, which is Go Tell It interviews rather, which is a Quilt Alliance project that collects 3-minute video interviews with one quilter talking about one quilt. So honestly, for me, there's nothing better than hearing about a quilt from the person that loves it the most. So the person who made it or the one who has cared for it as it's been handed down through generations. So these videos are really, really special. I wish A'donna could be here to talk more about the experience of bringing these stories to light and also just to hear her talk about the work that she puts into setting up a documentation day. If you haven't done something like that, I don't want to scare anyone off because I encourage you to do one in your community, but it is a little bit of work to keep track of the quilts, working to date and identify the age of historic quilts, making sure you know whose quilt is who, hiring a photographer, setting up the quilt stands. But the reward really is being in the room and being some of the first people to hear about these quilts, some of which have not left their owners' homes in some time. So the videos that we'll watch today were collected at several different quilt documentation days, including a few sessions with the African American Quilt Guild of Oakland, also a family QSOS oral history interview with 3 members of the Dixon family who live in Las Vegas about their family quilting tradition. We'll hear a little excerpt from a longer interview with the Dixon family. And we'll also watch videos recorded at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive during their show that's up now called Routed West, which is a museum show that has more than 90 African American quilts from the 20th century. So if you live near Northern California and love quilts, I hope you'll check that show out. I can't go because it's 2,400 miles from me. So if you can do so on my behalf, that would be great. And the last video I'll share is an interview with Eric Galindo that A'donna recorded during that day. And she wrote us and she was like, I met the coolest young guy. Sorry, Eric, she called you a young guy. But she was like, we've got to talk more to him about this quilt that he brought, which was made by his great-grandmother, and also his career in textiles and fashion. So we'll talk a little bit with Eric at the end. You'll see his video last, and then I'll invite Eric to join us after the interviews. So here we go. And I will say these are recorded live at places where quilters gather. So there's a little bit of chatter in the background. As you know, quilters love to talk. And you may need to adjust your volume or grab a pair of headphones, but feel free. The volume is hopefully pretty consistent between videos, but just know that you can turn it up and down as needed. All right.
Hello, my name is Niambi Clay, and this is a quilt that was gifted to me by my grandmother, Ellen Clay, from Joplin, Missouri. She said that this quilt was made by her grandmother, so this is actually a quilt made by my great-great-grandmother. I'm not sure which side, if it was her mother's mom or her dad's mom who made the quilt, but I just love it. It's bright, and it has beautiful patterns, and it just brings me joy, and so I just wanted to share this with the world. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beverly Davis from Sunnyvale, California. I'm a member of the African American Quilt Guild of Oakland, and this here is only my second quilt that I've made. My great grandmother had taught me how to do strip quilting when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s. So this is only the second one. The first one I made for my oldest daughter has gone MIA, so this one we will be guarding with our lives. Um, I actually started it about a little over 25 years ago, and I only had like the middle 5 rows done. And so when I retired, I decided to finish it at the nudging of my daughter. She was asking me, was I ever going to finish it? So these are like 4-inch blocks, and I incorporated clothes that she wore when she was a little girl, as well as material from outfits I made for my father's homegoing. So it's kind of like a memory quilt for us. We can sit back and, say we remember when we were wearing this or doing that. Um, the batting that I use is natural cotton, and then the back part of it is just a sheet from the nearly new thrift store. And when my grandmother taught me how to do it, she never said anything about documenting the quilts, so I made sure this time around I put a label on it for future references. And I do love family history, so being able to continue this tradition of quilting is kind of special to me. And I'm honored to be able to have this quilt documented.
My name is Ann Grice. This quilt was done by my mother, Willie Mae Scruggs, and I don't really know the age of it, but I know she loved quilting. That was her passion, and she was always quilting. Um, she didn't like other people to do any kind of stitching with her quilt. I can remember an episode where I asked to try to quilt with her, and she reluctantly said, "Okay, I'll let you give it a shot." After about 5 minutes, she couldn't take it any longer. She said, "Stop, stop, stop. Your stitches are too long. The cotton is not going to stay in there." So she took it all apart and redid it herself because her stitches were so small. You'd think it was done on a machine, but it wasn't. So she was very, very good at what she did. Yeah. She loved it, and I love watching her, but I couldn't do it.
Okay. This quilt is called Black Star, and it's paper piece. All of these little triangles are different fabrics, and it took me like a year, 12 months of Tuesdays. I only sewed on this quilt on Tuesday with a group of friends at the Presbyterian church that I go to and sew. So this is how this quilt came about. So that's it.
Hi, my name is Loretta Crenshaw Henry. I live in Oakland, California, and I am displaying a quilt that has a lot of sentimental value to me. The center part was made by my grandmother, and on the back, the other side, which you'll see in a few minutes, I made for my daughter. So this is my grandmother. Her name was Emma Trice Crenshaw. She was born in Charleston, Missouri in 1880, and then she later moved to Illinois, and they lived along the Ohio River. She made this quilt when she was a little older. One of the interesting stories about her was they picked cotton in order to survive. So my father and his brother, they would help her pick cotton. And one day she had picked enough, so she'd made like 98 cents that day. And she was said, "Oh no, we're going back in the fields and we're going to get enough to have $1." So they had to go back into the field, pick some more cotton. So they got a whole dollar for one day of picking cotton. It was a big major event in my father's life. My grandmother lived until she was 96. She died in Michigan, and she spent the last few years in a nursing home. And one of the activities that they did was they did quilting. And so this is one that she had made before then. It's made out of old cloth from dresses and things. It's got flour sacks. Whatever they had is what she used to make it. As you'll notice, there are 9 patches. So 1, 2, 3, the 9 patches, but they don't match because uh, you didn't have fabric that matched, and it was more of a utilitarian thing. They did it to keep warm. When my grandmother died, how shall I say this? My mother was not a fan of my grandmother's, so she just kind of left the quilts in a room by themselves. And when about 25 years ago, we discovered all these quilts, and some of them had fallen apart. So basically, what I did was I salvaged as much as I could from this quilt. That Christmas, I took all the pieces that were left over and I framed them, and I sent one to each of my siblings and one to each of the grandchildren. So they all had a part of Grandma's quilt. So this is the center of the quilt that she made, and I wanted it to be for my daughter also. So one side is the quilt that Emma Trice Crenshaw made, and on the other side is the quilt that I made, excuse me, for my daughter, Adia Jean Henry. So if you will turn it around and see the other side, okay? Hi, this is me again. This is the back of the quilt that I showed you the other side. On the other side, they both are medallion quilts, which means there's the main part in the center. And on this side, which is my daughter's side, it also has medallions. My daughter's favorite colors are red and gold. So I made this for her. It was like maybe the second quilt that I had made myself. And I made it on my little Singer sewing machine. And she absolutely loves it. So it's a heritage quilt. So she's going to have one side that her great grandmother made, and on this side it will be her quilt. So that's the story of this quilt, and I'm very, very proud of it. It just, every time I see it, it just gives me great, great joy to know that the two of them will be sharing, this wonderful object. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Torian Coates, and I'm the great-great-great-granddaughter of Dora Quinlan Robinson. I'm also the I'm also the granddaughter of Cynthia Coates.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Coates, and I'm the great-granddaughter of Dora Quillan Robinson. She was born December 1897, and she was a quilter. I was introduced to the art of quilting by my sister, Yolanda Sherrod, who is also a quilter. I had made the traditional quilt with the Underground Railroad blocks, but it didn't give a visual of our ancestors' escape from plantation, enslavement to freedom. So I was inspired to make this quilt. And it's called A Lady Called Moses. It's quilted by Patricia Bailey. It has 9 sayings of Harriet Tubman and 15 quilt blocks. Harriet Tubman was born into slavery, March 1822, and she died March 1963. After escaping slavery, she made some 13 missions to rescue approximately 70 enslaved people from 1851 to 1862, using the network of anti-slavery activists and safe houses known as the Underground Railroad. Secret signaling such as singing spiritual hymns, the use of open and shut windows, lighted gate porches, and the hanging quilts with the codes were displayed on fences and clotheslines to help slaves to freedom. Harriet Tubman, a conductor of the Underground Railroad, is viewed as an icon of courage and freedom. Some of her sayings are, "We will not be paralyzed by fear."
If you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting after you, keep going. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going. Don't ever stop.
And last but not least, another one of her sayings were, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." Thank you.
This quilt was made by Amanda Jones. Amanda Jones was my great great grandmother. She lived in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. She was a freed slave and made this quilt after when she was in freedom with family members. It has been passed on through the family through these years. I acquired it 2 years ago from one of my cousins, and the fabrics were probably pieces of fabric that were clothing or items from around the house. Amanda Jones had a laundry business, so it could be that some of the fabric came from pieces that she had done work on. As I said, she lived in Cape Girardeau. She had 7 children, and I'm thrilled to share this with the world.
Hello, my name is Marcia Carter, and I'm now known as Marcia Carter Washington. The name Washington came from my great grandmother, my mother's mother, who made this quilt probably back in the early 30s. So we are trying to date it. I'm going to have an expert, A'donna Richardson, to help me with dating the fabrics. But there is one piece of fabric in this quilt that belonged to my mother. It was her dress, and she was born in 1923. So this quilt was made after, probably when she was 4 or 5 years old, and she pointed out to me this little gingham here was a part of her dress. We assumed that the other pieces came from dresses, came from flour sacks, came from my great-grandfather's shirts. You can see some patterns that are male-oriented. And the youngest child of my great-grandmother was raised on her farm, and we still own the farm to this day. My great-grandparents purchased the farm in 1902, and it became a heritage farm in the state of Texas. A working farm over 100 years old gets a designation and gets a stone placed on the farm to note that it is a heritage farm over 100 years old. So that farm is still in Crockett, Texas, where Davy Crockett came through. She made this quilt, but she made other quilts. This particular quilt, my great uncle had it repaired many, many times. As you see here, I didn't want to disturb the provenance of this quilt. He found that it was so important to him. He slept under it his entire life. He died at age 88. She would be surprised that this quilt lasted, and she would be surprised at the actual quilts that people make to hang on their walls. A quilt on a wall was just been unfathomable to her. But anyway, thank you for letting me share my great-grandmother, Rosie Washington.
Hello, my name is Lynn Levitt. This is a family quilt. We believe that this was actually made by my great-grandmother and some of her sisters. The fabric in it is a little bit more modern than some of the family quilts that we have, so we think that it's from the next generation, which means that it was probably made in the 1930s to 1940s. There are some variations in design. It was a group quilt, most likely, where family members sat around together and chatted and quilted, and so that would account for why some of the dolls have caps and some of them don't. So this is another quilt from the Jones family quilts.
Hi, my name is Betty Ubelis. I was born in 1951, March 14th, 1951, in San Francisco, California. I am the sixth child of 9 children. My folks are from Oklahoma and Texas. I was inspired to make these dolls because I like sewing and I like to do things that's unusual. And so I was inspired by, yes, quilt artists, but my take on quilts are these dolls. I make these dolls from found objects, the heads, and then from recycled fabrics. They're made of silk, cotton, leathers, and wood. They have names, but I won't tell you the names. They have significant meanings because they represent our ancestors from old. This is a continuation. We all are an African people. No matter where you are in the world, we are African people. So these dolls reflect the Native American, the indigenous people here in the United States, and also African people. My inspiration were the South African beaded dolls. That's why I was inspired. But also, these have a long DNA from my own folks. My grandmother, who I'm named after, Betty Shelton. And so, I'm so glad to share my dolls with you. They have poems to go with them, but I don't know the poems by heart. So that's all I have to say. Asante Sana.
Hello, my name is Dolores Fitzgerald Presley, and I'm here to share my late husband's quilt made by his maternal grandmother. This quilt was made by Maggie Kidd Bullock, in about 1939. Maggie was born in Homer, Louisiana, and married Elijah Bullock, a minister. They had 14 children. Ed's mother, Glendora, was the eighth child to that union. During her marriage, they moved to Minden, about 30 miles away from Homer, where they owned a farm. So each summer, all the boy cousins would be asked to come to the farm to work. Now, Glendora married Henry Yancey Presley, and they moved to Dallas. But they left Ed there with Maggie for about a year. And Ed was about 4 when they left. He remembers helping his grandmother make this quilt. He had what he called the big scissors, cutting out the squares. And he remembers these squares were his grandfather's shirt. He would laugh at me because he said he didn't remember his grandmother having anything except these big scissors and a needle and thread. And he would laugh at me when I would come home with a rotary cutter, a cutting board, rulers, and all the things I felt necessary to make a quilt. This quilt is stuffed not with batting, but with old clothes, what they were calling crocus sacks, which are burlap sacks. There's some raw cotton in there, and even an old blanket. The quilt weighs a ton. I'll tell you a little bit about my husband. He started school in Minden at age 4, where he went to Webster Parish Training School for Colors. And at the end of that school year, he moved back to Dallas with his parents. But like I said, every summer, the boy cousins would have to come and help on the farm, and they would have to bring their bedding. Now, mind you, Ed was 6, 7, 8 years old, but they put him on a bus in Dallas, 217 miles away from Minden, with his blanket, and sent him out to the farm to help. We found this quilt in an attic when both of Ed's parents died in 1987. And he was so happy to find his quilt. We brought it back to California with us. And I, would ask him, can I take this to a meeting? Can I show it at a workshop? And I had to do everything short of signing an affidavit that I would guard this quilt with my life and bring it home in the same condition. I finally had to have it cleaned and was very fearful about having it cleaned, but found cleaners who did this sort of thing and was successful, but I haven't tried to mend it. I think the character is in the frayed parts, the holes in the back where you could see the batting, and that sort of thing. So this is my quilt now that my husband's no longer with me. And hopefully my kids will enjoy the quilt also. Hopefully not too soon, but they will enjoy the quilt later. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Niambi Clay, and this is the second quilt that I created. I like to collect masks as a habit, as a hobby, and so my second quilt, I wanted to do a mask quilt. I wanted to combine my two loves, and so this quilt started at a retreat with Marion Coleman, who is a master quilter, and so she helped guide me into making this quilt, doing the kind of double-sided pattern that you see here. And so I just wanted to embellish it with metallics and create that two-sided effect. And so this is what you have. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Pope Chappelle. I'm a member of the African American Quilt Guild of Oakland. And in September of 2016, I visited Washington, D.C. for the opening of the African American Museum of History and Culture on the National Mall. I was so inspired by the building itself. It just did something to me. So when I got back home, I was inspired to create my version of it, and this is what I came up with. The building itself is reminiscent of Yoruban culture. They also planted over 450,000 crocuses, and so I have purple crocuses represented at the bottom, and I also have purple tulle on the top to reflect the beauty of the crocuses and the building itself. I also included dimension by placing trees and cork used for the bark of the trees. It was so inspirational being there with all the people listening to John Lewis and our first African American President, Obama. So it was really something to see and be there at the same time.
So my name is Anita Kars, and the title of this quilt is Evangeline, and it comes from the word evangelist, which means the bringer of good news. And so this is a mixed media quilt. It's one of the first mixed media quilts I made in 2009. It involves photographs of my mother, and beading and dyeing and stenciling and just a lot of techniques to bring together into one surface. I prefer mixed media quilting, although I do other kinds of quilting, but I like to bring a lot of different materials to one piece. Let's see, 2009. So this is really close to the time when I really started quilting. So I actually had to problem solve and find my way how to make things work on this quilt. The middle of the quilt has a lot of beading in it, and it's also hand quilted because I couldn't put the beads through the sewing machine, and then the border is free motion quilting. I don't know what else to say. I just enjoyed making the quilt, and now I do more free motion quilting, and I have do more mixed media quilting, and I've sort of worked out how I can add stitching and using other media as well. And it's kind of in keeping with how African American art goes. You know, just like with music, we tend to improvise and find different tunes and so forth. Well, that's just like me. I find different ways to do things.
Yeah, my name is Pat Bailey, and I started this quilt because I was trying to use up a bunch of scraps, and I decided to sew all these together. And once I did that, I went back and put these in to give it more depth. And then on the border, I had it all solid black, and then that didn't look good, so I went back and took the borders off and cut it and put in these little small pieces, and I added embroidery of a mask on each corner.
Why don't we start and from left to right, just introduce yourself.
I'm Albert Dixon.
Okay.
And I'm his brother, Judge Dixon.
I'm their sister, Marilyn Haley.
And Marilyn and Albert are twins. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I feel really honored to be here with you today, to have been invited into your home to document your quilts and talk about your unique family dynamic. You are all quilters, with the exception of Judge. But you are all quilters and you quilt together. And that makes it a unique situation. And you also were quilting with your mom. So I'm really interested in how all this came to be and what inspired you all to start quilting together as a family. So I'm going to start with some questions here. Does someone want to start by telling me how and why you started quilting together as a family? Any one of you can answer.
The together part came about as a result of COVID. We had quilted separately, individually prior to, but COVID threw us together and we needed something to do. We started out because we had all of my mom's fabrics and stuff that she left, and we were making masks. And when the need for masks ceased, I started making baby quilts. And Albert came on board and we started making big quilts, and we do it together. He lives right next door. We're both retired and we both enjoy it.
Okay, great. So, Albert, why don't you tell me when, where, and how did you learn to quilt?
I have memories of my elders quilting. My grandmother and my mother and my mother's sister, my auntie. And I can remember them building their own quilting stand.
The frame?
The frame. Yeah, and crawling under it, you know, at about 8 years old, crawling under it and playing around. And they used to stand up there and stick needles and pins through it and do the quilting by hand. So that's my earliest memories.
Okay.
Always saw my mom sewing, doing handiwork and quilting growing up. Eventually, she used to quilt all the time when I'd come to visit her. And it seemed interesting. So at some point I said, I want to try it. And she showed me how and taught me how to make my first quilt. And that was probably around 1990.
Great, great. So when you work together on quilts, do you work individually and then come together, or do you start off a quilt project as a joint project?
It's usually a joint project. Albert is very talented in design. I tend to help provide the expertise in the sewing part and bringing his ideas together. And so between the two, ends up interesting.
Okay. So approximately, how many quilts have you made together?
Right now we have about 15 here in the house. We've probably made at least that many more. We don't keep them. It's part of a ministry. We gave the masses away during COVID when people couldn't get them, and when we give the quilts away as the Lord leads us.
Can you tell me how has quilting changed your relationships with each other? Once you started quilting together, was there a change in your relationship? But you're twins, so that's that's kind of a strange question to ask a twin, So we could skip over that one if you like.
We've always been very close. This, I think, is the most time I've spent with Elle since we were little.
Okay.
So
you would say that it has brought you closer together because you have the opportunity to spend more time.
I think it has.
Well, now, again, as a male quilter,
What's been your proudest moment or most significant achievement, your personal? Something that you learned
Actually,
or made?
I made that first quilt.
First quilt? Okay.
When I made, because I put it together. I put it together. And that was it. And everything after that was just icing on the cake. Just more building more and more. And you get to the point where you kind of confident. Say like, let's do this. I can do that.
Judge, you're not a quilter, but you are the eldest brother of the three. And we've talked about your mother a little bit. Is there anything that you would like to share from your experiences of what you've seen with your mom and with your siblings here? Is there anything that you would like to share concerning quilting and how you feel about these things?
My earliest memories, which precedes his, are similar to what he said. Seeing my mother and grandmother and aunt and women that they associated with in her living room with the quilting stands, the frames up, and us crawling underneath the frames, and they quilting, and then they, you know how they unroll them and roll them as they got to, things like that. And then years later, my mother quilting, you know, on her own, pretty much, and we saw that in Compton, and then going and getting them stitched, you know, taking her to get them stitched and things like that. Those are memories that I had. Also taking her to the quilt shows, where they were, I know one of my high school teachers was also a quilter. And seeing those shows, you know, I'm not the kind of artist that they are, but I can appreciate the effort that went into it, and I appreciate the products and the time that they spent and put into the gift that they gave me, and also the ones that my mother gave me. And I had one that my father gave me, but it's in LA too. And so I appreciate the art, the artistry, and the time spent and the care that they put into these. And there's not anything quite like it.
Eric Luis Maximilian Galindo. So this is Mama Sang's quilt is what I kind of nicknamed it myself. Mama Sang is my great-grandmother, actually, and just talk about it. So I didn't even know about Mama Sang's quilt. I didn't know that I had quilt makers in my family history until kind of recently, actually, because in the last couple of years, I started studying French couture pattern making. So I started to have my own sort of like textile art practice with that. And then it's a very interesting, very beautiful craft, honestly, that I really enjoy doing. But I did kind of have this, I guess, want to try to tie it back into my own sort of culture and heritage. So that's what made me inquire about my family history, because I know that my mother, a Black woman born in Morton, Mississippi, so I just assumed that I was aware of the fact that there's a very rich history of like Black textile art, especially from the South, especially with quilting. So I asked my mom if maybe she knew about any quilt makers or if we had any in the family. And then that's when she told me that her grandmother actually was a decently prolific quilt maker, and that her youngest sister actually still has some of these quilts. So after that, then I asked my aunt if it was okay if I can get one of them, and she would like part ways with it actually. So then I can look at it and like study it and maybe start to incorporate it into my own art practice. So I think the fact that I had my own textile art practice allowed me to sort of uncover this piece of family history actually. And it allowed me to, in a way, meet an ancestor that I wouldn't have been able to meet otherwise, because then I started to just have conversations with my mom and my aunts about this like Mama Sang and actually who she was. So like, for example, I didn't know that the reason they call her Mama Sang isn't because she was a singer or anything like that, but when she was a baby, actually, it would be difficult for her to fall asleep. So her mother would ask her oldest brother to sing her to sleep. And he would treat it kind of like a chore, and he would kind of very reluctantly just be like sang, 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 sang. And then from there, the name just kind of stuck with her until like for the rest of her life, actually. So that was like an interesting story that I was able to uncover through the quilt. And then my grandmother used to recount stories about how growing up, her mother, Mama Sang, would always have like the quilts out and she would always be working on them. And they would actually make them in a very communal fashion, I guess. So like women from the neighborhood who were also quilting would come by, they'd go to each other's houses and stitch the quilts together. So my great-grandmother was apparently pretty particular about her work. And if there were women who would come by who she didn't really like the way that they would stitch, if they had like too large of stitches or something like that, she would tell my grandmother, oh, quickly put the quilt away because I don't want her like really like large stitches to be on my quilt, which I think is a really funny story. I actually really love that. I love that she's very particular about her work because I try to be too. So I feel very blessed to have found this piece of family history, and it's been really nice to, I guess, continue to try to learn more about my culture, my history, where I come from, and I'm going to continue to try to uncover that as I continue to make my own like textile art, I guess.
So that is all of our pre-recorded content. I would like to invite Eric Galindo to join me now for just a short conversation. We won't have a ton of time, but if you have any questions for me or for A'donna, who couldn't be here today, or for Eric, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A. Hold on, let me get my little windows all set up here. All right, sweet. Okay. Hi, Eric. So Eric is a fashion designer. Correct me if I get any of this wrong. I took it directly from your website. So for Levi Strauss's premium collections, and also a freelance art director. And you graduated from Stanford's design school.
Yeah, I'm actually at Old Navy now. Sorry, my website is not
Sweet.
up to date. So I've been at
Awesome.
Old
No, that's
Navy.
fine.
Yeah, I'm on Old Navy's men's denim team. Is going on about a year now.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you do and your work, and how you got interested in sewing and couture fashion, and then we'll talk a little bit about quilts.
Yeah, of course. So I guess my journey kind of started in college when I started to study product design at Stanford, which their design is a very like open major. It's not very specific. It's about like sort of the process of design and design thinking and like user experience. So from there, I decided that I kind of found my interest in fashion. And then I kind of like found my way interning at Levi's actually for one of the summers before my senior year. And then after that, I found myself in the design department. But then from there, I realized, like, oh, I have a lot of catching up to do. I think I'm the only person on the design team who didn't study fashion design formally.
Wow.
So from there, actually, I started to just kind of like just seek out other designers, other people to see just like things that they had to offer, just to see about they had any advice about like, oh, how could someone like me go about like gaining some more experience. And then from there, I just had to touch base with the senior designer on my team. And she was telling me that she used to have her own clothing line, actually. I just thought that was a really interesting experience. So I wanted to learn more about that. And then from there, she told me that she has a friend who they used to show collections at similar fashion shows back in the day. And now she was a retired, and she was the couturier, actually, her friend. So now she was retired, and now she was teaching just individual one-on-one pattern making classes. And then that's how I actually fell into couture pattern making. So then she connected me with her. And that was in 2022, actually. So it's been going on 3 years now where I connected with her and I've been going. I just go to her apartment about every other week. She would teach me a new pattern. I draft it, sew it, bring it back, and she teaches me a new one. So
Wow.
that's
That's
kind
such
of
a
how I found that. Yeah.
great way to learn something, is from, kind of that direct transmission. I think that'll probably resonate with a lot of quilters too, because that's how a lot of folks learn to quilt. So we heard about you, or we found out about you because you brought this quilt to the documentation day at the Berkeley Art Museum. Do you remember how you found out about it? Because you were, not a quilter yourself at this point yet, maybe. But yeah, how did you find out about the documentation day, and what made you think I should go?
Yeah, so I have a friend actually who's an artist, and his medium is more like film. He does actual like he'll like shoot in like old-fashioned film and actually like develop it himself with his own like plant-based concoctions actually in his garage, which is really interesting work.
Wow.
And I know that BAMFA actually also is a film archive. So I think he's just really familiar with some of the exhibits and some of the things that go on at BAMFA. So he was the one who actually sent me the exhibits because I had just shown him, oh, look what I just got. It's got my great grandmother's quilt.
Oh, wow.
So he just thought I would be interested in the exhibit. And then I was just looking at some of the information online. I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's like this like workshop thing. I can go in and bring like my quilt and have it documented actually. And it just seemed like a really fascinating, interesting thing for me to do. And I was just hoping to maybe just learn more about the quilt itself and just see if I can meet any other quilters who are like local in the area just to see where it takes me.
Yeah, fantastic. And what did you learn anything during that documentation day? Like, what was the experience like of going to a public documentation day? Did anything surprise you?
I did learn some more about the quilt itself, actually. A'donna was showing me, I guess, like some common motifs of like specifically African American quilters. Whereas if you could like see the quilt, it has like this sort of like fan motif where it's like the four different pieces. And she actually was the one who pointed out that it's a common thing to see an African American quilter take common motifs that you would see and invert it and change it slightly. So then I was looking at the quilt specifically, and she would point out certain blocks of, oh, she would be like, you see how these all four meet in the middle, but then on this one, only two meet in the middle, only three meet in the middle. So she was saying that that was like an intentional inversion that my great grandmother did.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting as I was editing the videos collected during that documentation day and some of the others about different quilts kind of having that repeated pattern, but then tweaking it just a little bit. So it's like what you expect and then a little bit different, which I think is common for sure, and
Yeah.
definitely on display in that quilt.
I see someone in the chat. I think someone asked, can we see that? So is it okay if I just go grab it? Actually, I have the quilt back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please do. Awesome.
Here's a photo, actually.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
this is Mama saying right here. This is my mom actually in red, and this is my grandmother.
That is great. I'll make the screen big so folks can see.
Then, okay, here, let me see.
See, this is the perks of videos. Like we can see how soft and well loved this quilt is. If it was just a photo, but I can tell how drapey it is. It's amazing.
So you see how this block, all four meet in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But then here, let me try to find one where it doesn't. And then the one right next to it, only three meet in the middle.
Yeah, she's flipped one block.
Yeah. So I guess that's an intentional thing that A'donna was saying. You would see it from a lot of like African American quilters specifically. And you can see that this is like a quilt that was just like meant to be used. If you see the back, it's like totally like tattered and worn.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is a well-loved quilt for sure.
Yeah, because my mom even told me she remembers growing up. I was like, yeah, they would each have one. So there's more of these too, actually. My aunt has a few more quilts from Mama saying, which is exciting.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great.
that she would just like hand them out to like the grandchildren, and they would actually just like use it to keep them warm.
How does it feel now to be the caretaker of this quilt? Like, what are your plans for it? I see you've got it in a bag.
Yeah, I just keep it in my studio to kind of just like inspire future work, I guess. Like for one, I think it's been amazing that the way I phrase it is it's allowed me to like meet an ancestor that I wouldn't have otherwise. Because now like I just know more stories of Mama saying. I feel like I almost have been able to meet her. So I think that's like really important to me. But then it's also, I guess, I'm a very spiritual person. So I very much believe in like, I guess like a sort of like a divine truth or like a destined path. So once like something like this did kind of come into my lap, I was just like, okay, it just shows it. This textile art practice, this thing that I'm doing, maybe it is like the right thing for me to be doing. And then it's just like really nice to have something that will continue to inspire future work for me now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It is like a through line through the generations and into the future, kind of.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, because my mom even thought it was interesting that it skipped a couple generations. Because my grandmother didn't quilt and she didn't quilt, but she's like, oh, it's actually wonderful that now you're gonna kind of like revitalize that for the family.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people. They're like, my mother didn't quilt. My mother had no interest in quilting. My grandmother didn't quilt. But there's kind of this thing where it travels through generations.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you. One is somebody's already asked one of the questions I was going to ask you, which I didn't tell you ahead of time I was going to ask, but I'm sure you know that there's, quilts in fashion has been kind of a big trend in the past few years, both kind of referencing quilt patchwork and stuff, but also using vintage and antique textiles in fashion or to make garments. And there's a whole lot of feelings about it. We won't get too inflamed because some people feel like, that is not what the maker intended and that's not honoring their intentions. And others feel like, it's make do and reuse. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that or if that's played into your work or how you think about kind of, how would you feel if Mama Sang's quilt got turned into a jacket or a pair of pants?
I think for Mama Sing's quilt specifically, I was kind of want to leave it house. I don't want to do anything to it.
No,
So I know
yeah.
I've even had people ask me if I want to repair it, but I don't know. I think it was in some of those other videos too that actually like the wear and tear of it kind of like gives it that like story and character. So
Absolutely.
I'm totally fine with just keeping this one totally as is.
I think
But
that's a
like
great
for me
idea.
and some of my future work, I would love to like yeah, incorporate the quilting practice and like merge that with like my couture practice of like pattern making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely a big conversation because there are lots of quilts that have been well loved but still have a little life left in them, and making clothes is certainly one way that you can reuse quilts, and people have big feelings about it, which I think really is a testament to like how important quilts are to us as a community, and just how much we love them. So
Oh yeah,
that makes sense.
I think it could be an interesting thing too to kind of repurpose something and then you give it like this new life now, and now it's
Mhm.
actually being worn and like going through the world like with like the wearer and whoever like it was passed down to. So I do see that as like a really interesting and like important thing to do potentially.
Mhm.
I just think I don't know, I'm a little scared to just like do anything.
No, that is a beloved quilt.
So,
I think,
yeah.
unless it's an orphan and you're just like, but I don't know. I think everyone's got different opinions on whether that's like an honor or sacrilege. And it's really interesting to think about, yeah, the intersection of fashion and quilt making for sure.
Yeah.
And so I have one other question, and let's see, we just got a few minutes left, but I have to ask about your sewing machine. It's right behind you. Is this your routine machine that you sew on, and why?
It is actually, yeah, because my grandmother on my father's side, actually, so the other side of my family,
Mhm.
she gave me her vintage sewing machine, and that's what I first started sewing on. And then my couture mentor, she also has a vintage singer that she started sewing on. And from her, she was the one who told me that she's not going to teach me anything that requires anything more complex than a straight stitch, just back and forth. She's like, all you need for couture is a straight stitch, and then everything else is just like handwork.
Yeah.
So because of that, I guess I was just like, oh, that's really cool. I guess I really enjoyed just like how I guess like tactile and analog that practice is.
Absolutely.
And then so I just decided to kind of stick with it. So actually I brought my mentor's machine into a store to have it repaired. And then I was just going to move into my studio space that I'm in right now. So I knew I needed a new sewing machine for that space.
Mhm.
And then she had just gotten in this machine right here actually to fix it up and repair it. And I don't know, it just kind of called to me. I was just like, oh, I
Yeah.
think that'd be the one that I pick out. And I actually just learned afterwards that the specific type, the Singer 301, is actually like a very like specific machine that there's a lot of talk about it within the community.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. It just kind of like fell into my lap actually. So I feel
Great. Yeah.
that
It's
happened.
a cult favorite, I think, kind of, for people who are featherweight enthusiasts or singer enthusiasts. So,
Yeah, I just
yeah.
heard that the vintage machines, they're all metal, so I guess they're easier to keep like I guess keep alive actually. Whereas like some of the newer machines is like plastic parts and stuff. So instead of repairing it, you may have to just actually just get a brand new one. But I heard these, you
Mhm.
kind of keep these and like these can kind of age with you as you move through your journey.
Yeah. Fantastic. Elizabeth Schmidt said the 301 is great. Awesome choice. So,
Nice, yeah.
yeah, the seal of approval there from a fellow sewist. So,
Which
yeah,
is
I
great
wish
too,
we,
because I've heard that a bunch. And it's funny too, because I really like for me, I was like kind of like new to it when I picked it up, honestly. So I think it's great that I feel very lucky that I got a
yeah,
really good one.
you
Because
fell
every time
into a
someone
great
recognizes
choice.
it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that it is again something that kind of has this long story that'll now go into the future with you and your work. So, thank you so much for joining us. I wish we had more time to chat. I hope folks will check you out. Will you share your website with us if you want, or say it out loud?
Yeah. Should I just drop
Yeah,
my
drop it in the chat if you want.
Yeah, because more, I guess my website is a little bit more difficult for me to actually update. So
Yes.
I
Or
post
anything,
like,
if you have any other social media, you're welcome to share it, and tell folks to look out for your work, maybe at Old Navy sometime.
yeah. So now my Old Navy work, any men's denim that is releasing actually from here on out is stuff that I have worked on now. So just
Wow.
putting
That's so
that out there. But
exciting.
then here, I'll put my Instagram handle. That's where I post all of my individual like lessons and pieces.
Yeah, great. That would be fantastic. I'm sure folks would love to see your work. And, I know we're also excited to see people get interested in quilts and join the quilt world. So, thank you so much for sharing your family's quilt with us and showing up at the documentation day. I hope, the Quilt Alliance is really dedicated to quilt documentation, and it only works if people share their quilts and their stories with us. So, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's great. And I love the
Yeah.
video you put together, actually. This is my first time seeing like everything put together like that, actually. And it was great.
Yeah, you were there for some of those videos, but it is sometimes watching it is different than being in the room to see and hear everybody's stories. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. I will pull up my screen again and share one little final video and a couple notes. Jennifer has shared a link to next week's Textile Talk. So join us next week if you would like. And let's see, hold on just one second here. We'll get this going. All right. Oops. Thanks again.